only facing impeachment, but also new crises involving old adversaries. In Iraq, we're getting a look at the damage left behind after pro-Iranian demonstrators stormed the U.S. Embassy compound in Baghdad earlier this week. The protesters made it as far as the main reception area, which they torched before they were repelled by security guards. Demonstrators gathered outside the facility in a heavily fortified section of the Iraqi capital on Tuesday, just days after U.S. airstrikes killed at least 25 members of an Iranian-backed militia group. President Trump blamed the violence on Iran and said Tehran will pay, quote, a very big price, comments echoed by Defense Secretary Mark Esper when he spoke to my colleague Andrea Mitchell earlier today.
This is part of Iran's malign behavior that they've been spreading across the region from Africa all the way through the Middle East into Afghanistan now for 40 years. And it's this type of bad behavior that simply needs to end. And we resume all the we have all the capabilities inherent in the United States military to either respond to further attacks or to take preemptive action if additional attacks are being prepared.
Joining us now to take a closer look at all of this is NBC News' Tehran bureau chief Ali Arouzi and Nayyera, former White House senior director and State Department spokesperson. Ali, let's just bring this, since Esper gave us 40 years of perspective, let's just put this into perspective. There are a few superpowers or a few major powers in the Middle East, and until 40 years ago, Iran was actually in our camp, and their meddling that was okay, in the same way that Saudi Arabia meddles in a way that is seen as okay, generally speaking, to the U.S. government. What is Iran's involvement in what happened in Baghdad?
Well, Ali, look, I mean, the militias that work in Baghdad are called the Hashd al-Shabi. The Hashd al-Shabi is an umbrella group that controls a large group of militias in Iraq. They are directly under Iran's patronage. They are fiercely loyal to Tehran. They pretty much take their orders from a man called Qasem Soleimani, who is the head of the Quds Force, which is the international arm of the IRGC. I mean, yes, these are mostly Iraqi people. They are not Iranians in the militias, but these are Shias. These are Shias that are aligned with Iran. Many of their ancestors during Saddam's time had been living in Iran, so there is a very close connection with them. Iran provides them with arms, it provides them with support, and it provides them with money, and they are very grateful for that, and they have a very close working relationship. It's unlikely that they would do anything really big without the tacit okay from Iran, if not more than a tacit okay from Iran. So they are very closely connected. And this all plays into the larger power struggle that's going on in Iraq. Iraq is basically torn between the two countries that have the most influence there, Washington and Tehran. And they're in the middle of that power struggle. And Iran's great power is these militias that it has mobilized, that it has carefully cultivated over the years in that country. I mean, a lot of people would argue that Iran's influence is much greater in Iraq than the United States. So to answer your question shortly, Iran has a lot of influence and strong ties to these militias. The guys that attacked the U.S. Embassy are called the Hashd al-Shabi. Again, they answer to, are called the Khatib Hezbollah, which answer to the larger umbrella group Hashd al-Shabi. Their members come and travel to and forth from Iran. They're trained by the Iranians, so the relationship is very close.
So let me ask you this, Nayyera. Mark Esper also said the malign behavior has been going on for 40 years and it needs to stop. To a point that Ali Arouzi just made, and I want to show my viewers a map of the broader Middle East outside of Iran. We're talking about Iraq, which neighbors Iran, but Iran has militias or forces that they support or fund in Yemen, the Houthis, in Lebanon. They've got Hezbollah in the Gaza Strip, all over the Middle East. So when you say this has to stop, this is a challenge. Iran's influence in the greater Middle East is a challenge that the administration you served in faced. It's a challenge this administration faces. It's the one that we faced since 1979. How does it stop?
Well, this is part, like I said, it's very complicated, and everyone likes to talk about the Middle East, and the Trump administration in particular likes to dive in and say that if you just have rhetorical bombs and you have maximum pressure, everything will be solved. But that's not the case, right? If maximum pressure were to have worked, we would probably not have an embassy that was almost overrun and our personnel there hiding in safe rooms for almost 2 days. Iran has a deep network throughout the region. They also have a really robust military. So it's not as simple as the way the United States rolled into Iraq in 2003 and decided we're going to topple the government. Iran would actually have a really protracted, long war should we engage exclusively militarily. So under the Obama administration, looked at engaging them diplomatically, knowing that if Iran was part of the world process and international order under the Iran nuclear deal, if they needed and had a reason to comply with the nuclear deal in exchange for having some economic relief, then that would potentially give space to talk about the other issues, which is Iran's terrorist activities throughout the region. When the administration came in, the Trump administration, and effectively pulled out of the Iran deal, other members of the international community stayed in. So they have diplomatic relations with Iran, and the United States is effectively isolated. Iran now is also pulling out of the deal, has strengthened the Iran Revolutionary Guard, the right-wing elements in Iran who never wanted to have a conversation with the United States. So we now face a situation in which we do not have any diplomatic tools that we can use. And now Iran has responded and reacted to a United States airstrike in Iraq. At the same time, we don't exactly have a great foothold in Iraq. We have the ability to move in forces from Kuwait, which are moving in Marines to help support, but we don't have the strength and support of the entire Iraqi government. It is largely a Shia government. Earlier in 2019, the Iraqi president told Donald Trump, you are not going to have forces here permanently just so you could watch Iran. So Iraq is struggling to maintain its own challenge with its Shiite population and the militias. So they're not going to come in heavy, hard in favor of the United States in this situation.
Ali Arouzi, the one thing that is interesting about Iran is that it's got a somewhat market-driven economy. The government has a lot of involvement in major industry in Iran, but it's a market, and they are suffering from the U.S. pullout of the deal, the near collapse now of the Iran nuclear deal. Is the government in Iran suffering enough that what Nayyera is saying is possible, that it can come back to the table and some new arrangement can be negotiated? I mean, arguably, we had a relatively good arrangement going with Iran with the nuclear deal, but what happens next? Is that a possibility?
At this point, it doesn't look like it's a possibility. Look, America has essentially waged a financial war on Iran. And if you want to look at it just in the perspective of a financial war, well, yes, that has been successful. They have decimated the Iranian economy. The Iranian rial has entirely lost its value. The price of everyday goods has skyrocketed. Jobs are at an all-time low, and people are really struggling in Iran. And that was the result of some of those very violent protests we saw 3 weeks ago in Iran that had flared up because gas prices had been raised, because in Iran they just didn't have enough money to fund operations in the country, so they needed to get it from the gas. But on the other flip side of things, it's not bringing Iran back to the negotiating table, and it's not tempering their behavior. So I guess it's not working.
Guys, thanks to both of you. Ali Arouzi, NBC News Tehran Bureau Chief, Nayyera Haq, former State Department Senior Advisor and White House Senior Director. I appreciate it. All right.